Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Senior Roundtable. We are so glad that you're here today and got a great program for you, and really excited to hear all the different information here on this. So we've got some folks that we would like to do some introductions for right off the top of the hour here. So my name is Laura Steigelman. I am the facilitator for Senior Roundtable. I love Senior Roundtable. I learned so much. A lot of it doesn't even pertain to me, and I'm able to share it with friends, colleagues, et cetera, to say, did you know about this group? And did you know that they do this, et cetera? So I have learned a lot personally that I have used in my life, and then also share it with everybody. So thank you, everybody, for being willing to be our speakers, Janet and Terry today as an example. Elder Source runs everything behind the scenes. So they do your email announcements. Gabby is here. Give us a wave, Gabby, and Andrea also. So Gabby and Andrea work close together. Gabby is my contact for putting everything together, putting it out there to everybody, etc. So if you want to get on an email list, anything like that that's going on, Gabby is your person for that. And then Community Foundation is why this group exists. So a few years ago, in fact, did we just have our 15th anniversary? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that. It's gone. It's just amazing. So I'll go like 16 years ago, they started giving out these aging grants and getting more involved in the senior sector, and realized a lot of folks didn't know what other organizations did and other individuals that were in that same sector. So this was created, Senior Roundtable, to give folks a chance to meet, greet, know of each other, get to know what's out there, and of course these great programs that educate all of us on the different things that are out there and happening in this sector. So thank you to the Community Foundation, Elder Source. Really appreciate everything that you do. And then if you're willing to keep your video on, we really appreciate it, just because it's just nice. I was in a meeting last week, unrelated to work stuff, but a meeting I attended, and there was 42 of us in there, and I was the only one that had my video on. And I did it out of sympathy for the speaker, because it was just a big black wall. And did I want to be the only person? I felt like, you know, the world's biggest weirdo just having my video on and nobody else did it. It's like, I felt bad for that speaker, just no facial expression. So if you're willing to have it on, and it's one of those days that you're comfortable having it on, that is awesome. I'm going to stop for just a second and hit the record button. Hold on just a second. There we go. Okay. So we are recording the meeting, and we will post that to everybody probably beginning of next week. We've got to run some things on it, and then we send it over to Gabby, and she gets it ready to send out to everybody. So you'll see that. And if you're willing to put your name underneath your video, I think Mac is going to put into the chat box there how to do it if you want to add your organization or your full name, if you just got your own name or you're using someone else's login or something for some reason. And then again, we will record the meeting for today. So about Senior Roundtable, it's a coalition. Anyone is invited. We meet every other month. We put the schedule out usually in December for the following year, as far as when those 6 meetings are. Everybody is welcome. So if you are in this meeting maybe for the first time and you're like, gosh, I know of a couple people, please feel free to welcome them in. Gabby will get them set up on the email invites. And then again, you know, networking with others, gaining program information that hopefully helps you in what you do, or even if it's just personal knowledge that you're interested in. And then our mission statement: support seniors to do those collaborative relationships, all about networking and knowing what's out there and how those things can help us. So I'm hoping Marlon is here. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And if not, we may need to come back to her a little bit later. So Marlon, if you're here, I know as our sponsor, we want to give you your 3 minutes on the clock. Okay. And let me just make sure that that's not her bouncing in right now in case something has happened. Nope, I don't see it. Okay. So we'll come back to this in just a little bit. I don't know why. There we go. I don't know why that is popping up. So hang on just a minute. Okay. So organizational announcements is where we're going to go shortly. If you have something that's going on, an event, etc. Elizabeth Paulson couldn't be with us today, but she sent one in, and eventually Mac will be putting that into the chat box. So you'll see that, and we'll promote that here in a couple slides down the road. And then we'll have those couple opportunities for networking. You'll get a chance to go into some breakout rooms and either say hello to folks you haven't seen for a while that you know, or hopefully grow your network by adding a couple more people to that list. And then we've got a great program today, as you can see there, and you've seen in those email announcements. And then Always Best Care has donated 2 gift cards as our meeting sponsor. We'll give those away at the end. Must be present to win, and then we'll wrap up and close up the meeting at 10:30. So that is where we are going. I'm trying to keep an eye on the participant list to see if Marlon has joined us yet, so we can do her presentation for her. And then if you have any announcements, please feel free to put those in the chat box along with your contact information. In addition, just because you won't get a chance to meet everybody in here today, if there's some names that you don't recognize, if you want to put who you are and where you work and what you do, etc., in the chat box, that is a great way to do that. We will also include those notes when we send out the post-meeting email with the recording. We'll put those notes in there from the chat box that are relevant to everything that everybody's talking. We'll ignore the hi, my name is Laura, welcome to the group kind of stuff, but we'll put in all the key contact information that somebody may be putting in there. So you can see Mac has put something in the chat box already. Betsy has done a welcome in there. So anything that you would like to put in there as we're going through the meeting today, please feel free to do so. And again, announcements, introduce yourself if you've got an event coming on at work, any of those kinds of things that you think would be helpful. We also have a senior roundtable LinkedIn group. So you can see the different things that you can do there. Please don't overpost, no sales, all those kinds of things, spam, etc. But it is a great way that if you're in this meeting and you say, I met that lovely person from the Community Foundation. Who was that? Who was that person? You can probably find her in that Senior Roundtable LinkedIn group. And that's a way that you can continue connecting with one another even after the meeting is over. So there you go. Please feel free to join. I will get an announcement saying that somebody has asked to join from LinkedIn, and I'll go in and go ahead and get that set up for you. So I don't know if Marilyn's here yet or not, or if someone else from her group is going to present. So we'll come back to that if she does join us on the meeting. And I may have something in my email that came in after I closed it off, just saying that there was something happening. She couldn't join us. But Always Best Care is our meeting sponsor today. Again, hopefully we'll see them a little bit later, and we'll go back to this 3-minute presentation. All right. So I am really pleased to welcome Janet, who is a regular part of the program. Today she's on our speaker agenda, who is going to tell us about what's going on at the Community Foundation in that aging grants world. So Janet, if you need to bump me, I will stop sharing so you can share your own screen.
All right. So like Laura said, I'm Janet Allen from the Community Foundation for Northeast Florida. And basically, I don't think it's going to take too much time, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what the Community Foundation for Northeast Florida is, and then just talk briefly about the grant opportunity for nonprofits that are serving aging adults. So our mission at the Community Foundation is to stimulate philanthropy to build a better community. So we serve nonprofits, but we also serve donors. And we do that through a variety of ways. Grant making is one of them, donor stewardship is another, and then civic leadership is another focus area for the Community Foundation. We cover the 6-county region that sort of involve Jacksonville, so Duval, Clay, Baker, St. John's, and Putnam counties. And just to show a little bit of our impact, we're celebrating our 60th anniversary in 2024. And last year, we ended the year with $655 million in assets and having made almost $70 million in grants last year. And the Community Foundation houses 724 individual funds. And most of our grant making is from donor advised fund grant making. But we do have endowments that were left by some of the same donors to the Community Foundations to do grant making through a competitive process in perpetuity around areas of interest for those philanthropists. And so my department at the Community Foundation is called the Programs Team, and we handle about 65 of those endowments, and 4 of them have been set aside specifically for work with aging adults. We have other donors who've set up funds that focus on the arts, or set up focus on early childhood, for example. So these 4 funds allow us to do some grant making for aging adults and caregivers that support that work. So the application opened a couple of weeks ago, but if you want to apply for funding as a nonprofit, you have to be in one of those 6 counties that the Community Foundation serves. The deadline for the applications is the end of this month at midnight. The grant sizes can be up to $15,000. And the focus is really any direct support for aging adults or support for caregivers of aging adults. You know, the goal is to help keep seniors at home for as long as they can live independently and safely at home. And so about 4 or 5 years ago, we sort of expanded the focus of what the grants can do to support the caregivers who keep those aging adults in place. So grants will be decided by September 1st, and whatever application you're going to be supporting or program, the work will have to be done between October 1st, 2024 through December 31st of 2025. It doesn't have to take 14 months, but if you have a program that lasts that long, then you can apply for that. But you can also apply for, 6-month program or a year-long program. We're hoping to, out of those 4 funds, we make about $250,000 in grants to support aging adults. And typically, we get about 4 times as many requests as we have dollars in funding. So it's pretty competitive process. But I'm going to give you some information on how you can contact me. We also have the ability to do one-on-one consultations, 30-minute Zoom calls. And you can contact me via email or go to our website at jaccf.org. And you can look at our grant seekers section, and all the information on the rules and criteria for applying are there. But those one-on-one conversations can be had all the way up until the second day before the grant application is due. We kind of stop them. The day of the due date we kind of leave that free to make sure that we're helping anyone with technical issues. But we're happy to walk through a program or answer any questions about the application. And if you're a nonprofit in Northeast Florida, we're hoping that you'll apply.
So any questions for Janet or any clarification? We got a couple minutes still on the schedule for Janet's portion. If anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask a question. So let me pause for just a second in case anybody needs a little bit more information or.
Absolutely. And I put a link directly to the page on our website where you can apply for the Aging Adult Grant. And then I'm also going to add the link where you can just set up a technical appointment on what our grants, what the grant process is. And if you have any questions about a particular program, if it's a fit for the fund, then I'll be happy to set up some time.
Janet, that's awesome. Thank you very much for being willing to share that with everybody today and the information that's in there. And I love that whole technical appointment thing, that you're willing to have that meeting one-on-one with folks to give them more information specifically. So, all right, so let me just pause one more time, looking at the list over here on my second screen, make sure nobody's unmuted that may have a question. Okay. So again, Janet and the Community Foundation, thank you for everything that you do. We literally would not be here today if it was not for this awesome organization. So we appreciate that. All right. So we are going to head into Terry's presentation. Let me share this with you, and then I'm going to stop sharing so Terry can kind of take over. She's got her own slides and things that she will be displaying. So we've got a great program, and appreciate the flow, Terry, that you put together for us so we can brag about that in this kind of a slide. And welcome. Very glad that you're here with us today. So Terry, I'm going to stop sharing. And it is all yours.
Okay, so I am going to start sharing. 1 second. Share. And then, do you guys see it?
Yep, perfect.
And you see both slides or one slide or?
We just see your presentation. We see what we should see as a participant. We're only just seeing the one slide with your beautiful photo on it.
Perfect, perfect. We want to scroll over that real quick. Okay, so I have to ask, and I do this, every time I present, because when I first started this role, I'd heard of an ombudsman, right? And I knew the Navy had an ombudsman. There's some military components for an ombudsman, but I have to ask how many people on this presentation in this little networking group has heard of an ombudsman. So I would just curious of your little Laura, if you could, everybody raising their hand. Okay, just kind of getting an idea on who's heard of these services. Actually, interestingly enough, last year, legislative session, the state of Florida just put together an ombudsman program for children now. So the senior industry has an ombudsman, and this ombudsman goes out to assisted living communities, nursing homes, and adult family care homes to really advocate for a resident's rights. So as you see, it's an appointment in Florida, usually coming from somebody within the Department of Elder Affairs. So our ombudsman program, Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, is actually housed in the Department of Elder Affairs. And my appointment came from actually somebody at Alzheimer's, at the Alzheimer's Association, the secretary for the department, Michelle Branham. And so, you know, there's, depending on the political wave of the feel of, you know, how Florida's rolling, the ombudsman can kind of stick around, or it can be kind of a political appointment depending on who is the secretary for the department. So the ombudsman, independent, investigates complaints. We attempt to resolve them. I like to say that we are just problem solvers. We're out there talking to residents, talking to families, talking to administrators of nursing homes and assisted living communities, and really just trying to help them solve problems. And then we also, we aim to identify systemic issues. So staffing, everybody on this call is very aware of the staffing issues that are prevalent in nursing homes, assisted living communities, and for various different reasons. So identifying those systemic issues is something that we really kind of keep our eye on. Discharge and transfers are something that's come up lately that seems to be systemic, that the feds kind of have their eye on. So just wanted to give you the, you know, the, not only the history, but obviously what it means. And then I want to play a little video for you guys, just to kind of give you a little more flavor here. Hopefully this works. I should have tried it when you told me to, Laura, right?
Is this video, Terry, is it this slide has the video embedded in it?
Yeah, yeah.
Is there a go arrow or something that when you hover your own mouse over it that allows you to move it forward?
Wow. There was. All right, so we might forget this little video.
Terry, I don't know if it's something as simple as that you can put the link in the chat box, because I could either display that for you, or if Mac can do it, we could do it if you have a link to whatever that video is.
Hold on, give me 1 second.
So
It is a cute video, but hold on 1 second. Can you guys see my screen?
We're still seeing the woman talking with the man that's got the blue name tag on.
All right, copy. And then, hold on. So to put I found the link, and now I'm going to put it, oh God. Where am I putting this, Laura?
If you want to put it in the chat box, along the bottom of your screen, there's the word chat if you don't have that opened up already. And then in the chat box, you can just put it to everybody, or Mac, yep. If you come back on, would you be able to play it, Mac?
Absolutely.
Okay. So you can send it, just put it in there and he'll grab it out of the chat box.
I think I have to end my slideshow to find the chat box.
Should be along the bottom of your screen.
Well, I only see because I'm in presentation mode.
Oh, yeah.
All right. If you need to end it, because I'll have to share mine regardless. So.
Oh, we don't have to play it. It was just a cute little video. I'll skip it. I promise. It's fine. So a little bit of the history of the Ombudsman program in the 60s and 70s. Across the country, you know, they were hearing more problems with seniors in nursing homes. Assisted living facilities weren't even a thought at this point. They were more like rest homes, if you will. And so as those problems kind of slowly presented themselves, the government thought, you know, what do we need to do about this? There was really no program to address it. They were seeing an increase in the residents' violation in residents' rights, their health, their safety, and all of that. And so because of that, they then put their heads together and came up with a demonstration project. It was actually Nixon in 1972, and it was first launched in Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan. And then in 1978, it became a part of the Older Americans Act. And then in 81, we officially have the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. So every state has a long-term care ombudsman program. There is a state ombudsman for every state. And so I thought it was kind of interesting because when you think about issues that present themselves, right? I often think about, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and there was a school fire back in the early 1900s, and the doors did not push out. They only pushed in, or, you know, you were only able to pull them in to get out of the school. And as a result, a lot of children, you know, perished. And so now doors open outward. And so same kind of concept, you know, a systemic issue that becomes apparent and then the government kind of steps in. That's kind of the history of the program. And then for any geeks on the call that want to look up statutes and are thinking, you know, I want to learn more about the governing laws of the Ombudsman Program, I just put the statutes in here just in case. So, you know, when I was preparing this, I was thinking, you know, how much in the weeds do people really want to learn about the Ombudsman Program? I'm very obviously interested in not only the history, but how we can move the program forward. I was just in Fort Worth, Texas last week, meeting with all the other state ombudsmans and hearing all the other things that states are doing for seniors is just amazing. And so how do we make Florida the best ombudsman program in the country, and how innovative can we be for our seniors is definitely something that interests me. So hopefully this my little presentation doesn't go too far in the weeds, but I can just get a little excited about it if you couldn't tell. So mission is to improve the quality of life for all Florida long-term care residents by advocating for their health, safety, welfare, and rights. So when I first started, I remember thinking about the word rights, and we all have rights. We have the right to privacy, the right to free speech. There's tons of rights that are embedded into our everyday lives that I do kind of feel we take advantage of a little. We don't even think about. Not take advantage, we just take for granted, sorry. And so I looked at the Resident Bill of Rights, and if you look at this, you can really see how simple this is. So if you're a resident living in a long-term care facility or nursing home, you know, the right to live without fear of physical restraint, right to privacy, personal care, treated with dignity, speech and communicate freely, the right to participate in your own care plan, and then the right to voice grievances without discrimination of reprisal. So when you think about how simple those are, I want to take it down another notch. And it's like you have the right, and this is so simple, but I hear it all the time, to get your medications in a timely manner when you need your medications. You have a right to shower and get a shower as often as you want to get a shower, at what time of day you need a shower. Those simple things that we really take for granted, that we can just get up, have a cup of coffee, take a shower. If you are really dependent on assistance, be it in an assisted living community or a nursing home, you have to depend on somebody for those basic rights. The right not to sit in your own, you know, urine for any length of time. You really have the right to advocate for yourself, to say, hey, I need to be changed. So that is kind of heartbreaking to me, I feel. And it's something that is so overlooked and, like I said, taken for granted, because it's things that we can do every day. But when you are in a home, that is not the case. So I just kind of wanted to give you this summary of Bill of Rights. It was kind of first enacted when the Ombudsman Program came about, and it can be as simple, as I said, as just having warm food and not eating your food cold. So simple. So then I thought, well, how, you know, if people were interested in how we were structured, right? Every Ombudsman Program across the country is structured a little differently. Many of us are in a state unit on aging. So like I said, Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program housed in the Department of Elder Affairs, which is our state unit on aging. But some are housed in legal aid providers. Some are housed, some are their own state agency, oddly enough. Majority, I would say, are in the State Unit on Aging, but then there's another component that is also kind of triggers how we're structured, and it's either you're decentralized or you're centralized. Now, the only reason I even mention that is there's probably 12 or 13 states that are centralized. So what does centralized mean? It means that we are really managed by the State Unit on Aging, even though we're an independent federal body. Everything reports up to the state ombudsman in Tallahassee. So we have 30 full-time staff. They're sprinkled throughout the state. They report to Tallahassee. We have 250 volunteers, councils, districts, all of that. But if we were decentralized, which the majority of states are decentralized, and Andrea, you'll love this. I think I mentioned this to you once before. The ombudsman is housed in the AAA. So if you think about the state ombudsman trying to manage programmatic things at the state level in Tallahassee, and their ombudsman's being hired and managed by the AAA, there can be a disconnect, right? Because your responsibility is to make sure that the ombudsman within the AAAs are really performing their duties as they should based on the Older Americans Act and all of those things. But because we're centralized, that AAA component has been removed. Sometimes I honestly get a little torn, like, should this be in the AAAs or should this be centralized? But anyway, I just kind of wanted to mention that. I also wanted to mention the role of our volunteers. As you see, we have 250 volunteers about. Now, back in 2008, 2009, we had about 400 volunteers. And so what does that mean? It means that it is the volunteer that goes into the nursing home, that goes into the assisted living community, builds the relationships with the residents, advocates on their behalf, that sort of thing. So prior to COVID, you really saw higher volunteer numbers, even though those volunteer numbers have been decreasing since about 2009, 2010, and every state has run into this. And so you think, why have volunteer numbers been decreasing over time in the ombudsman program? And it's really because it is a very complicated volunteer process. So currently we have 250, but prior to COVID, we were down to like 190, 195. And when you think about how many seniors, and we'll get to that in a little bit, are in Florida, that's really not an adequate number to address issues in these homes, that sort of thing. 30 staff, very low for Florida. I always like to compare us to Texas. When you think about Texas having a similar bed count, Texas has a similar number of facilities. Texas is a decentralized program, meaning their ombudsmen are housed in their AAAs. Statewide, they have about 116 employees. Florida has 30. And then we sprinkle in some, it's called other professional services. Excuse me, it's called OPS. We sprinkle in those folks to like kind of do answering the phone, some administrative work or whatever. But Florida's structure has truly depended on the volunteer to do the work. Over the last 10 years, many states have gotten away from that structure. Florida, we're hanging on tight though. We're still dependent on our volunteers. So just again, to give you more of the structure, we have 3 regions. We just had a study done. We've had 2 studies done recently in the time that I've been here. Just heard the final report yesterday. We're probably going to go to 4 regions, and we have 14 district offices. So you'll see it ranges all the way from the Panhandle and the Northwest area all the way down to South Dade. And those district offices throughout the state is where our district manager is housed. The district manager reports up to the ROM, that sort of thing. But when you think about a district ombudsman manager, think about a volunteer manager. They're recruiting the volunteers, training the volunteers, they're assigning the volunteers to their facility, they are entering travel for volunteers. So it's really more of an administrative role, those 30 FTEs that we have. And then each council, we have 18 different councils throughout the state. Each council has a lead volunteer that comprises our state council, which is kind of the advisory body here at the state. and it's in statute that they, are supposed to advise us programmatically and that sort of thing. I won't go into too many details on that, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of the structure. So when you think about the certification process for a volunteer, if you're a volunteer, and I think this has changed over time, you want a rewarding experience, right? You might do Meals on Wheels, where you're delivering a meal, you're making a resident of somebody living in their home happy. Maybe you get to sit down with them and spend some time with them. Our volunteers, it's a little different. We have a very skilled volunteer workforce. Hold on one second. Ooh, I just wanted to see what my next, sorry, one second. So our volunteer, we recruit them. They have to be interviewed. They have to pass a level 2 background check. Now, some volunteers are like, whoa, 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 I'm just trying to volunteer here. You're going to do a level 2 background check on me? Yes, actually we are. We're going to make sure you have no conflicts of interest. So if your mom is in a nursing home, or you've worked in an assisted living community, that sort of thing, you can't really volunteer. Although we have started making exceptions that you just wouldn't participate or go volunteer in a home that perhaps you worked in or that you have a relative in. But when you look at the training hours, check this out. You have to complete 36 hours of training, 20 in the classroom and at least 10 in the field. That's a lot for a senior who is thinking, hey, I'm just going to go out and volunteer. The volunteer consists of, complaint investigations, routine visits, possible casework, that sort of thing. But the other thing about the volunteer position is Florida's unique, guys. I mean, we have a lot of seniors. And so if you're the attorney and or the physician or the pharmacist or the lawyer, and you lived in Wisconsin or New York or Jersey, and you retire to Florida, you are a skilled volunteer workforce. You may absolutely want something a little more challenging because you're like, hey, I want to stay sharp in my skill sets. And so you'll perhaps go through the training, and then you enter the nursing home for the field training. And you're like, oof, this is a little heavy. I don't know. And it could be depressing, quite honestly. And so you want to give back, you want a rewarding experience, but you go into these homes and perhaps it reminds you of your mom's time in her nursing home, or when you had to take care of her at her assisted living community. And you're like, you know what? I don't know that I can do this. And so I bring this up to say, here we are in Florida. We have a volunteer-based program that is truly responsible for advocating for the rights of these seniors, yet it is a hamster wheel, because we recruit you, you come in, we train you, and then right when you get in the field, you're like, I can't do this. Then we recruit another one. On the other hand, we have some that come in and they love it. You'll see retired police officers that love it. Social workers, because that's kind of how they're wired to advocate and to go and to investigate. And so they love participating in our program. But that 250 volunteer mark is really low for what we need, to be brutally honest, in this presentation, which of course is being recorded. I wanted to bring up this badge. And the reason I do that is because, and it's stated in statute, that after you complete all of this training, we're going to give you a badge. Some volunteers take that badge and they are the police. They go into these homes and they're like, I'm going to shut you down, or you can't do, I mean, that emboldens them and gives them this power that they have, because they have this badge that they flash. And anybody who, and going even through my training, the minute you enter a nursing home or you enter an assisted living facility, I feel like there's alarm bells or something. It's like there's a desk at a teller at the bank where they hid it underneath the desk and they alert the whole facility, like, the state's here. And we're really not the state when you think of ACA going in and citing the home on different things. We're really just there on behalf of the resident. So it really is a tricky thing with this badge and volunteers and giving them power and the authority. really to advocate. And so it can create some contentious situations, but it's necessary just for the facility to let you enter, just for the facility to let you do your role. So wanted to mention that. Now you think about our program responsibilities. Like I mentioned, we're investigating, resolving complaints, advocating for changes to improve residents' quality of life. What does that mean? Maybe our volunteers are meeting with legislators so that they can tell a legislator all the great things that we're doing in these nursing homes. Or they're letting them know of the systemic issues they are seeing in nursing homes, be it lack of staffing or discharge transfers, like I mentioned, that sort of thing. Also representing them, their interests before governmental bodies. So last year or two, God, maybe it was 3 years ago now, the prior state ombudsman testified in front of the Senate here in Florida to say, hey, these staffing standards need to be adjusted. So we advocate in that way as well. And we also want to make sure that residents, have access to us and know that we're there. And that is why early on in this presentation, it's like, how many have even heard of an ombudsman? So if you're a resident in a home and you're thinking, my daughter's in Wisconsin, guess where my son is? New York. Guess where my sister is that might help me? She's in Ohio. And so Florida tends to have a lot of seniors whose family is elsewhere, because when you were in your 60s and you retired, Florida was a great place to retire to. Then you get here and your kid didn't follow you, your sister didn't follow you, your mom, your dad, whoever it was, didn't come with you. And now you truly need outside assistance and somebody to advocate on your behalf. And that's where I can get a little passionate about this program, and making sure that seniors know that they do have a voice, and it's just simply called an ombudsman. So wanted to mention that. Core duties, as I mentioned, the case, complaints, routine visits, information and assistance. What does this mean real quick? Routine visits. We, in the state of Florida, we're charged with going into communities one time a year. It was called an assessment. And so one time a year, guys, isn't enough. But when you have so few staff and you're seeing those volunteer numbers dwindle, maybe an assessment was the best thing that you could come up with. Say, at least we'll be in these homes one time a year. But other states are doing what is recommended by the feds and the Older Americans Act, and that is going into assisted living communities quarterly and going into nursing homes monthly. In the state of New York, they are in nursing homes every week, just to advocate. Because when you think about a routine visit, if you're Ethel and you only see me one time a year, are you really going to tell me a lot? Do you feel like you trust me? Do you feel like you know me? Probably not. But if you see me more often and you have that relationship, you probably would. So I have made it a mission of mine to get into these homes quarterly and monthly by hook or by crook. And we are figuring it out here. But it to me is imperative. And when you look at information assistance, all that really is, how do I get on Medicaid? We get a lot of different calls: Medicare, Medicaid fraud, placing their loved one, that kind of information and assistance. So we handle a lot, is basically what I'm saying. So ombudsman, they go into a facility, what do they look for? And we have a routine visit flyer actually that I kind of want to read to you, because it's not, some of it's intuitive for sure, but when you walk in and you're really looking around, the call lights, are they blinking and not being responded to? Is equipment broken? Do residents have access to go outside if they just want to go wheel outside and sit in the sun? Can they navigate the hallways and the common areas? How do the residents look? Are they groomed? Are their clothes soiled with food? Those types of things that you can just instantly see. And you kind of get a vibe when you walk into these homes. How many residents are out and about? How many are laying in bed, right? And then sound, our staff talking with each other about the different residents, using their names, sharing personal health information. Is there music blasting, or staff on their cell phone? How are they treating? How are they speaking to the resident? Are they treating them with respect? Talking to them in a way that, is friendly and warm versus, borderline rude, that sort of thing. So what are you hearing in these facilities? Smell is is the number one thing, right? You walk in, does it smell like urine? Does it smell appealing? Is it unclean? Those types of things. And then feel, are the floors sticky? Is it hot? I had one complaint recently. This daughter called and she kept saying, it's 80 degrees in my mom's room. It's too hot. And it's like, your mom probably likes it 80 degrees because we know seniors like it a little warmer, right? But if you're the daughter and you're in there and it's like, I'm sweating. Well, no, it's not about you. It's about your mom and how she's feeling. And then some of the warning signs that we see, like you'll see the kind of decline with these facilities where they're trying maybe to cut corner, maybe there's high staff turnover, maybe the facility is a little understaffed, food decline. I mean, it's amazing, guys. Try not to get fired up. In Miami, we recently had a home where it's literally a piece of bread and oatmeal. And it's like, what kind of food? But because that saves the facility money, right? I serve you less food, I save money. So those kind of warning signs. And then there's the red flags for sure, which is the severe lack of staffing or the complaints are being ignored. You see residents that are losing weight, consistent odors, consistent uncleanliness, that sort of thing. So that's when an ombudsman goes into a home, kind of what they're looking for. And then these numbers that I'm showing you here in Florida, they kind of fluctuate a little because nursing homes will open or they'll close or ACA will shut them down. And so roughly 700 nursing homes, close to 3,000 assisted living communities, 257 adult family care homes. Those are very common in South Florida, North and South Dade, Miami area, about 200,000 beds. That will fluctuate. Over 6 million seniors living in Florida, as you know. And then this stat, I should have double checked before because it's almost hard to believe that roughly 1,200 people move to Florida each day. But I heard that recently and I'm like, oof, is it 12? I mean, that's a lot of seniors moving to Florida, guys. And we only get 1.5 million in state funding. And that state funding has been consistent since about 2010. Very rarely goes up, doesn't go down. It's a consistent across the board. But here we have so many more seniors living in Florida. And so really, I didn't come up through the ombudsman program. Past ombudsmen have. But coming from the outside and kind of comparing us to other states, seeing what other states are doing, it really, why has our funding stayed so stagnant when we have even more seniors moving here? So those kind of issues I'm still trying to flush out. We have a very supportive governor. As you can imagine, he's done a lot for Alzheimer's. And so I'm fully confident that, and we have a very supportive secretary. I mean, she spent 10 years at the Alzheimer's Association and nobody is as passionate as me about our ombudsman program as our secretary. So I do foresee some changes coming about, but I just kind of wanted to give you a flavor for the numbers and how we kind of compare. So 2 pillars of LTCOP, consent and confidentiality. Guys, confidentiality is in the Older Americans Act. I feel like I break the law. Like they really drill it in your head. Like you cannot release a resident's name. You cannot release health information, even internally. If we'll get sometimes the guardianship side of elder affairs will call and be like, we have a guardian, they're requesting information on somebody living in a nursing home or assisted living. It's like, we cannot give any information. We can't release their name. We can't tell you how many times we visited. We can't tell you any issues they've had. It is strictly confidential. And when we do have to submit reports, we redact everything. And then consent. We truly go into these homes and look at issues and advocate for residents through their lens. It is truly through the resident's lens. So if they tell us they don't want us to do anything, we are not mandatory reporters. Mandatory reporting is one of those things that we hear about all the time. It's like, well, how could you see somebody sitting on a floor that is in their own waste? There are certain things that you would think we have to be mandatory reporters on, for sure, and I get it. But when you think about the broad spectrum of our program, if a daughter has, and this happened recently, well, actually 6 months ago, maybe, spent her mom's, not even her inheritance, her mom's funding, her mom's resources, her social security, her savings on her second wedding, and stole her money. And the mom says, I don't want you to do anything. We can't, because the mom doesn't want her daughter to get in trouble. If you think about, hold on, let me just move this thing over here. If you think about a family that moves their loved one in, and this happens more than often than you think, guys, too. This is kind of crazy. They will move their loved one in, they'll pay a few bills to that assisted living community or the nursing home, and then they totally disappear because they have the mom's money in their name, their power of attorney. They've transferred all of the finances or their resources. And then you have a nursing home or an assisted living community sitting there with a resident they're getting no payment from because the family is nowhere to be found because they've stolen their money. The stories that you hear, honestly, are crazy, but that consent from the resident, even if a resident is being abused or their son is abusive to them, won't say a word. They will not give us consent to advocate for them, maybe to limit the son's visitation, whatever could resolve the problem, because they don't want perhaps that son to get into trouble. So it really, these two pillars I mentioned, because it can get so sticky when you're dealing with family members. And we know that 80% or something crazy of abuse, neglect, exploitation comes from the family. So and then I wanted to give you kind of an example of the top 5 complaints in nursing homes. And this always kind of fluctuates to personal property, obviously being stolen, perhaps losing their clothes in the laundry, that sort of thing, medications, not getting it on time, prescriptions not being refilled, that sort of thing. Response to assistance, so the call light staying on. Visitors, so the son hates the daughter, his sister, and so he doesn't want the daughter visiting because he thinks that the daughter's talking to the mom about her money, and so those the restriction of visitors can be a complaint for us. And then obviously personal hygiene not being changed as often. We've really seen a decline in the number of complaints over the last 10 years because we have some data processing issues on our side that we're trying to fix. But we get about 2,000 complaints a year. But 10 years ago, when we were logging everything, we had about 10,000. And so when you think about a volunteer workforce, if you're a volunteer and you walk into a nursing home and you address a situation with a resident, and you don't log it in a database or tell somebody so that it can be captured in data, then the problem never existed. And so I just told you how hard it is to become a volunteer. The average age of our volunteers is 73 years old. They're not tech savvy. And so they don't necessarily want to go in and be like, you know what? I did help Mrs. Smith with her medication, but I took care of it. I don't really need to log it or anything like that. So that decline in how we're capturing data is a concern because we report all of this to the federal government. So that's how we get funding. And like I said, if they're not tech savvy and they don't want to go home and enter this into the computer, no data just means it's somebody with an opinion. Nothing, it didn't actually happen. So it can be tricky too, capturing that kind of thing. Top 5 complaints, same in assisted living, kind of just rotates: housekeeping, laundry, personal property, that sort of thing. But I kind of wanted to mention too how we are changing, and it's really becoming more resident focused versus facility focused. As I mentioned, we really did try to, because of our limited resources, say, well, if we could just get into these homes one time a year. Well, we're really upping the ante on that and getting in more often. And then increased visibility. Doing a lot with advertising. We do stuff on Facebook. We've run billboards in the past. Like, how do we raise awareness for this program? Community newspapers telling those feel-good stories about how an ombudsman helped a resident in some capacity. So increasing our visibility, the volunteer recruitment is huge, because without volunteers, with 30 full-time employees, it is tough. And then the legislative asks. So when you think about the legislative ask, it's asking the state to give us more funding to hire more staff. So coming up, we're going to have a discharge and transfer. We're calling it a transfer advocate, because what we're seeing, and again, this is just from a federal level too, is that a nursing home gets tired of the resident, and they're like, you know what, it's too many problems, I don't want to deal with it, I'm going to transfer them out. Well, you're transferring them to another nursing home. It's not like there's a level of care that is needed, like going from an assisted living community perhaps to a nursing home where your care is elevated. It's truly because they don't want to deal, they don't have the staff, whatever. And so Sally's been a problem, and I'm just going to send Sally to a different nursing home. That kind of transfer, those kind of transfer issues are something that we're seeing so much more of, or they can't find the funding, the resources. So then where do you send them? Well, we'll send them back to the hospital and say they have a UTI or whatever, and then they don't want to take them back. It's called resident dumping. Got rid of them, sent them to the hospital. Now let the hospital send them somewhere. So many times they'll be discharged. This is going to sound crazy, guys, to their car if they are in assisted living, or not assisted, I'm sorry, nursing homes, and they don't want to stay, or they feel like, you know, once they're discharged, they'll just send them to their last, the address that they have on file. And if it's a PO box, then guess where they're going? They're going to a homeless shelter. And so the neglect of our seniors in a state that is so large and has so many of them, the stories, like I said, are just kind of crazy and depressing. And so I understand why volunteers come and go and think, I can't do this. But at the same time, the state, as a state, we really need to step up and do more. I feel like I had more stories for you guys. I got a million of them. Like, we could probably sit here for another hour and I can just kind of shoot some off at you if you're interested. But I think I know I haven't filled up my time completely, but I did want to leave some time for some question and answers. And then, of course, if anybody is interested in volunteering, one of the things that you'll see, we had like 2 weeks ago, we had to decertify an ombudsman because came in, did all of the training, but then you find out he's starting a CNA company. And so he's going to hire CNAs, train them, and he wants to place them. And so, of course, he needs to get into some of these assisted living communities or nursing homes because he's trying to grow his business. And so flushing that out with volunteers, you really have to find the volunteer whose intentions are truly just to be there on behalf of the resident. And we do find volunteers because, you know, maybe their mom or their dad had a bad experience. And so they'll say, I know what my mom went through, and I want to make sure no one else's mom goes through this. And so they'll volunteer. But there's some volunteers out there who have their own self-interest in mind. And so we really have to flush them out. But at the same time, we need so many of them. So it's like, do we excuse this one because we need them in these homes? That sort of thing. So
Terry, do you have any other slides? I have a couple questions for you, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
yeah, it was just my contact information.
Perfect.
But anybody can write that down if you want, or put it, if we have our little Zoom expert Mac on still, you can maybe cut and paste and put it in the chat.
So if you're comfortable with this, Terry, if you've got contact info or anything like that you'd like to send next week in the post meeting wrap up,
Oh yeah,
we can do that as well. If this is a slide that you would like attached to that, we can do that as well.
yeah.
So Terry, a couple questions if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
The couple slides that you had on the complaints, who do those come from? Like the property, or I don't want my sister being able to come in. Who do you hear that from?
So a lot of times the complaints will come from another family member. A lot of times it's the guy next door in the room down the hall that hears you yelling. And so maybe they're savvy enough to have an iPad and can find us and say, there's a resident 3 doors down that is in extreme pain. Somebody needs to get here.
Wow.
And maybe the police have come out, or maybe they've called other emergency services, but it's a continuing pattern. And it's like, well, how do we resolve this? How do we go in and really say, why is this happening? Is it a medication issue? Is, you know, what is her health status? Is her doctor involved? All of those things are what, we have a lot of retired nurses that are volunteers actually, and they're probably our best because they can really go in and be like, okay, this is a problem moving forward. Or they'll identify it as more of a trickier issue or whatever, but the complaints will come from residents themselves. But retaliation, guys, is big too. So it is hard when you are dependent on somebody to give you a shower, to make sure you get to the bathroom, to then complain about them. Because if you issue a complaint and say, hey, Joe's not changing me as often as he should, or, you know, the CNA is mean to me, guess what the CNA possibly could do? Ignore you a little more, not be as kind, change you even less. So that fear of retaliation is something that I feel like residents struggle with. And back to us needing to be in these facilities more. If they knew that, you know, they have a relationship with the ombudsman is like, look, Sally, I am not going to release your information. This is going to be strictly confidential, but I'll find a workaround here so that you don't feel retaliated against. Because that's the number one reason that we don't see complaints, is they're just too afraid. Yeah. But they come from all over. A lot will come from out of state. I talked to my mom, just talked to her on the phone, and she said, you know, they're not taking her to her doctor's appointments. Can you go in? Because they need somebody physically on the street to go in. And that's where we come in. So.
And Andrea very patiently has a question. We have like another 5 minutes. So yeah. Andrea, go for it. And if anybody else has a question, feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand, whatever you'd like to do. Andrea, please.
Thanks, Terry. Isn't there a Jacksonville office off of Beach Boulevard, that whole Koger Center? Is that where that office still is? And would we call that locally, or do we call the number on the screen at the state?
If you call the number on the screen, it will transfer. So what it does, it picks up, the phone system picks up from the area code that you're calling from, and it will transfer automatically. But that office is over off Art Museum Drive.
Right.
So that's what the Jacksonville location is.
Okay. Yeah. And the other questions, you know, a number of us do a lot of outreach activities. I guess if I wanted to have a Florida Ombudsman brochure at my table, would I just buzz to that office?
Yes. But you know what, Andrea, I'll hook you up or anybody else on here and just make sure we could drop them off. We have a ton in that office over there. So it's just a matter of Tracy either dropping it off or sending it in the mail. So yeah, anything you guys want to do to help us spread the word on this program. I feel like it's just a forgotten resource, maybe. I can't explain it. Ombudsman's an odd word. Not a lot of people know what it means. And so that's where it gets a little tricky.
And so I understand. So if I call and make a request to examine something or complaint, are you required to respond by 48 hours?
Yes.
What's the turnaround?
Yep. And so depending on what the complaint is, right? So if it's, we're usually out there the next day, if not that day, depending on how bad it is. And then a lot of times we'll have to get APS involved if it's, you know, really bad, or ACA, if it's a facility related issue. They'll go out though. They are so short staffed right now that unless it's a truly egregious complaint, they're not going to go out obviously and say, hey, this person's food's cold. They're really going out for the heavy stuff. But if your mom or your dad or, you know, any loved one is facing any kind of issue that doesn't rise to the level of an APS or an ACA, we are usually there 24 to 48 hours. And a lot of times we'll call on the phone too. There's something, we have residents that they can't seem to work their remote to save their life, and they will blow our Jacksonville off just for the remote help, because they have no one else to ask. And maybe the CNA is so tired, and they're so not only tired of answering the question about the remote, but they have somebody else over here that needs to be changed. And so maybe Tracy will call and be like, hey, Joe, the administrator, can you go see Miss Smith again and fix her remote? It runs totally the gamut. So
I bet. Thanks.
And Andrea, if nothing else, move on to Janet is unmuted. Janet, please.
I just wanted to, you know, ask a question about, you know, it's amazing to me that you're so underfunded. I
Mhm.
mean, for the role that you play in the safety of our seniors. So, and also I know that in a lot of instances, the reimbursement rate for the care is inadequate, and that's why everything is, probably very hard for an administrator to staff and et cetera. So I don't know. I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity or an organization that wanted to sort of get the word out in Northeast Florida about the program and the needs of the program, promoting, getting volunteers for your organization or awareness for your organization is something that, would support the senior population in Northeast Florida. And it's, something that potentially, our aging adult funds could help support. So if there's somebody out there that's willing to sort of maybe put together a campaign on those and just on that area, then, reach out to the Community Foundation. Keeping our seniors safe is definitely in line with what the fund was established for.
Well, and I appreciate you mentioned that, Janet. Maybe you and I can grab some time. I'm in Jacksonville too,
Yeah.
but I think there's been such, and rightfully so, an emphasis on keeping seniors at home, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many services and resources for seniors at home. But once you get into these facilities,
Yeah.
you are truly at the mercy of those around you. And when your family doesn't live here, it can be
Yeah.
depressing, to say the least.
Yeah,
So
maybe we
thank
should.
you. I would love any tips you have, and we're definitely working with the state to get more funding now. I just think it's just a program that's kind of been overlooked in a way.
Janet, that's a great idea. If anyone's interested, reach out to Janet, reach out to Terry.
Mm.
The funding, maybe something that makes a difference, a PR campaign, a communication, posters, who knows what that could be. So that's great.
I
Okay.
have one more quick question.
Yeah, please.
So when they come to the front desk at ABC facility, and they show this badge, do they then have the freedom and the
Yes.
opportunity to walk around without an escort, or how does that even work?
Yep. So you're in you have a badge, you're walking around, and we really encourage you to talk to at least 10% of the population there. Because if you're a volunteer and you have 10 facilities, and it could turn into a full-time job. So a lot of times, and I've been in there where they'll come up to you in the hall and say, "Oh, I love this place. This place is great," because they see the DON or the administrator walking by, and then you turn the corner and they'll wheel back around and be like, I have so many problems here. And they start whispering to you because they're so afraid to even tell you. So the more we're in these, yes, they are free to roam, do whatever they want. But it's hard for an administrator to be like, okay, come on in and just look for all the problems that you can find. That's why it has to be a more collegial. We're not here to point out problems in the facility, guys. We are here truly for the resident to see how can we solve any problems that the facility has with the resident, vice versa, to come to some sort of consensus on a resolution for whatever the problem is. Yeah, but they're free to walk around. It was a long answer, sorry.
No, it's awesome. All right. So would you please join me? Huge round of applause for Terry and everything that she's doing in her role in the presentation, and for Janet. Thank you for being here, Janet. Thank you for announcing about the grants and everything that the Community Foundation does for the senior sector. So very appreciated. Behind the scenes, as we wrap up, we have a group of folks who volunteer. They don't have to go through 36 hours of training, so it is a little bit easier for them to volunteer probably for this, but they help bring these programs to life. They come up with the great ideas or what's relevant or what people would like to know. They reach out to the resources. Again, Andrea, thank you for reaching out to Terry to get this whole thing set up and this great idea, et cetera. So if you're on here, if you'll please give us a wave so we can say thank you to you. We very much appreciate it. And we are having a couple more meetings this year. You can see that we've got 3 listed down there. We're intending on Zoom. We may have one that turns into an in-person meeting. We'll certainly keep you posted if that happens, and we'll give you plenty of notice if that's the case. Hopefully you can make it either way, if it's on Zoom or not. And if you're interested, please join our LinkedIn group.